April 16, 1944, 32,000 feet over Brandenburg, Germany. Technical Sergeant Frank Malone watched from the ground crew assembly area as his squadron's P-51B Mustangs grew smaller against the grey English sky. The 357th Fighter Group was escorting B-17s to Berlin today, a mission that pushed the limits of even the Mustang's impressive range. The new P-51Bs, with their 85-gallon fuselage tanks, had made such missions possible, but the constant struggle against fuel consumption haunted every pilot's calculation. In the lead Mustang, Captain Daniel Whitaker scanned the cloud formations ahead. His aircraft, Lady Liberty, carried the same modifications as the rest of the squadron, the Packard-built Merlin engine that gave the P-51 its high-altitude performance and the additional fuselage tank that extended its range. The 357th had been flying these machines for 4 months now, and they'd proven their worth against the Luftwaffe's best. Whitaker checked his fuel gauge. The wing tanks still showed nearly full. Having switched to the rear fuselage tank first as per protocol, that tank was dangerous when full, shifting the center of gravity too far back and making the aircraft unstable, so standard procedure was to burn it down first. But that meant the return journey would rely entirely on wing tanks and external drop tanks, and many pilots had found themselves running dangerously low on fuel during the trip home. "Bandits, 3 o'clock high!" The radio crackled with Lieutenant Miller's warning. Whitaker looked up to see a formation of FW-190s diving from 34,000 feet, their silhouettes unmistakable against the clear blue. Drop tanks! All aircraft drop tanks and engage. 60 miles short of their target, the Mustangs jettisoned their external fuel tanks and climbed to meet the German fighters. The B-17s continued onward as the aerial ballet began. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs tangling with Mustangs in a lethal dance that would continue for 20 desperate minutes. When the skies finally cleared of enemy aircraft, Whitaker counted 3 FW-190s shot down, 1 Bf-109, and 2 of their own missing. They reformed to catch up with the bomber stream, but Whitaker's eyes kept returning to his fuel gauge. The fight had cost them precious fuel, burning through reserves at combat power. He made a quick mental calculation. They would be cutting it extremely close on the return journey. 3 hours later, the remnants of the 357th limped back across the English Channel. 4 Mustangs had already ditched in the frigid waters, their tanks run dry. Whitaker's own Needle hovered just above empty as the white cliffs of Dover came into view. Lady Liberty touched down at Leiston with less than 5 minutes of fuel remaining. As he climbed down from his cockpit, legs shaking from the adrenaline and fatigue, Whitaker found Technical Sergeant Malone waiting. "Another close call, sir?" Malone asked, his eyes already scanning the aircraft for damage. "Too close, Frank. We need more range. We're losing too many good men to empty tanks." The maintenance hangars at Leiston Airfield never truly slept. At 3 in the morning, Technical Sergeant Frank Malone stood beside an opened P-51B, the aircraft's cowling removed, its Packard V-1657 engine exposed under the harsh worklights. Around him, 3 other mechanics worked in focused silence, the gentle tapping of wrenches and occasional murmur of conversation, the only sounds breaking the pre-dawn quiet. "That's the 3rd one this week," said Corporal Jim Davis, wiping grease from his hands as he approached Malone. "Running them dry every mission." Malone nodded, his eyes never leaving the fuel line routing he was examining. The 357th Fighter Group had lost 11 Mustangs in the last month, not to enemy fire, but to fuel starvation. The P-51B carried 184 gallons in its wing tanks and another 85 in the fuselage tank, plus up to 150 gallons in external drop tanks. On paper, more than enough for the Berlin run. In practice, combat maneuvers, headwinds, and navigational detours meant pilots were regularly stretching their reserves beyond safety margins. "The brass keeps extending the missions," Malone said, tracing the fuel line from the wing tank to the engine with his finger. "These boys are flying escort all the way to Berlin, burning fuel at combat power, then trying to get home on whatever's left. Something's got to give." The P-51 Mustang had transformed the air war over Europe. When paired with the British Merlin engine, it became the perfect long-range escort fighter, fast, maneuverable, and capable of accompanying bombers deeper into enemy territory than any previous American fighter. But even the Mustang had its limitations. "The problem is fuel management," Malone continued, pointing to the selector valve system. "They burn the fuselage tank first because it's unstable when full. Then they drop the external tanks when combat starts. After that, they're left with just the wing tanks for the return journey. If they get into a tangle with 109s or have to fly around weather, they're cutting it too close." The original P-51B design had been modified with the 85-gallon fuselage tank as an afterthought, a calculated risk to extend range. This modification created handling problems requiring strict fuel management protocols. Pilots had to burn the fuselage tank to about 25 gallons before entering combat, or risk dangerous instability. Major Thompson, the group's engineering officer, entered the hangar, his face drawn with fatigue. He'd been up most of the night drafting condolence letters for 3 pilots lost to the English Channel. "Sergeant, what's the word on Captain Whitaker's aircraft?" "No mechanical failures, sir. Just ran her almost dry. Gauges don't read accurately below 30 gallons, so he was flying on fumes and didn't know it." Thompson sighed. "We lose another bird today, and we'll be below 50% operational strength. Wright Field says there's nothing more they can do with the fuel system design. We're flying at the absolute limits of what these machines can do." Malone glanced at the Major, then back at the exposed fuel system. "Maybe Wright Field can't do anything, sir, but we might be able to—" "What are you thinking, Sergeant?" "The fuel feed system isn't maximizing our range. We're losing too much to inefficiency in the lines. I've been studying the system for weeks, and I think there's a way to squeeze more miles from every gallon." The Major looked skeptical. "You're talking about field modifications to a combat aircraft. You know that's against regulations." "With all due respect, sir, losing pilots to fuel starvation is also against regulations." Major Thompson studied the sergeant's face for a long moment. "You have 24 hours to show me something concrete." After that, I never heard this conversation. Frank Malone's quarters were sparse by any standard: a narrow cot, a footlocker, and a small desk where normally he wrote letters home to Pennsylvania. Tonight, the desk was covered with technical schematics of the P-51's fuel delivery system, illuminated by a single desk lamp. Outside, an April rain pattered against the window, providing a rhythm to his thoughts. The P-51's fuel system was a masterpiece of engineering, but it had been designed and modified in stages, first with the wing tanks, then the fuselage tank, then provisions for drop tanks. Each addition had been integrated into the existing system rather than reconsidered as a whole. The result was inefficient routing and pressure inconsistencies that wasted precious fuel. Malone sketched a new configuration on ruled paper, his pencil moving with the precision of a man who had spent years with these machines. His idea was surprisingly simple: redesign the fuel line routing to create a more direct path from tanks to engine, reduce the number of bends in the system, and, most importantly, modify the fuel selector valve to allow for more precise control of the fuel mixture. The standard Parker fuel selector valve mounted in the left wheel well managed flow between the different tanks, but its design created pressure drops at crucial junctions. By reconfiguring the interior channels and smoothing the transitions, Malone calculated they could reduce fuel consumption by nearly 10% at cruise power settings. He worked through the night, calculating flow rates and pressure differentials. By dawn, he had a complete schematic and a list of required parts, most of which could be salvaged from damaged aircraft or fabricated in the base machine shop. As the first light of morning filtered through the window, Malone rolled up his plans and headed to the maintenance hangar. There, he found Corporal Davis already at work on a damaged P-51 that had belly-landed the previous day. "Jim, I need your help with something," Malone said, spreading his drawings on a workbench. "But it's not exactly by the book." Davis studied the schematics, his expression changing from curiosity to understanding. "This is going to get us court-martialed, isn't it?" "Only if it doesn't work," Malone replied. "If it does, maybe we save some pilots." They waited until the shift change at noon, when the hangar would be at its quietest. With two other trusted mechanics standing guard, Malone and Davis began work on Lady Liberty, Captain Whitaker's Mustang. They started by removing the access panels to the fuel selector valve in the wheel well. The sound of metal tools against metal airframe seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet hangar. Malone's hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he disconnected the first fuel line. They were violating at least a dozen regulations, modifying a combat aircraft without authorization. If caught, they'd face severe disciplinary action. If their modification failed, a pilot might die. "Hold this junction steady," Malone instructed, as he carefully rerouted the primary fuel line with a gentler curve. "The sharp bend here creates turbulence and resistance. We need laminar flow, just like the wing." For 3 hours, they worked in tense silence, modifying the fuel selector valve's internal ports, streamlining the fuel lines, and installing a custom-machined fitting that Malone had secretly fabricated the day before. The new configuration created a more direct path from the wing tanks to the engine, reducing the pressure loss that occurred in the original system. "The real trick is here," Malone explained, pointing to the modified selector valve. "I've reconfigured the internal channels to reduce restriction. When the valve is in the wing tank position, fuel flows with less resistance. Should give us better fuel economy at cruise power." The final step was the most daring, modifying the fuel pressure regulator to maintain more consistent pressure across different power settings. This would allow the Merlin engine to operate more efficiently, especially during the long cruise portions of escort missions. "If this works," Davis said, tightening the final connection, "how much more range do you think we'll get?" Malone wiped sweat from his forehead with a rag that left a smudge of grease behind. "On paper, maybe 40 miles, but I'm hoping for more. The fuel consumption curves aren't linear. A small efficiency gain at the right power setting could translate to a lot more range." As they replaced the access panels, Major Thompson appeared in the hangar doorway. He approached silently, his face unreadable as he inspected their work. "It's done, sir," Malone reported, standing at attention. "Ready for testing." "And if this modification causes an engine failure at 30,000 feet?" Thompson asked. "It won't, sir. The system is more reliable now, not less. I'd stake my life on it." "You're staking someone else's life on it, Sergeant." Thompson was silent for a long moment. "Captain Whitaker has volunteered for a test flight tomorrow morning. He knows the risks." Malone nodded, relief and anxiety mingling in his chest. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Thompson replied. "If this doesn't work, we're both finished in the Army Air Forces. Dawn at Leaston Airfield, April 19th, 1944. A thin ground fog clung to the grass as Captain Daniel Whitaker performed his pre-flight inspection of Lady Liberty. Technical Sergeant Malone stood nearby, his face betraying none of the anxiety churning in his stomach. "You're sure about this modification?" Whitaker asked, running his hand along the cowling. "Yes, sir," Malone replied. The fuel delivery should be more efficient at cruise power settings. You should see about 10% better economy, maybe more. And you've tested it on the ground." "For 6 hours yesterday, sir. The engine ran smoother than before, but the real test will be at altitude, under actual flight conditions." Whitaker nodded, then climbed into the cockpit. The Mustang's Merlin engine roared to life, its sound familiar yet somehow different, smoother, with less fluctuation at idle. Malone watched as Whitaker taxied to the runway, performed his final checks, and then thundered down the tarmac into the morning sky. The test flight plan was simple but comprehensive. Climb to operational altitude, perform standard cruise power settings for 2 hours, then execute a series of combat maneuvers before returning to base. Throughout, Whitaker would carefully monitor fuel consumption and engine performance. Major Thompson joined Malone as they watched the Mustang disappear into the clouds. "He's one of our best pilots," Thompson said. "If anyone can accurately assess the difference, it's him." Malone nodded, words momentarily failing him. 4 days of work had led to this moment, and now there was nothing to do but wait. The radio in the control tower crackled with updates as Whitaker reported in at regular intervals. Climbing through 15,000 feet, engine performance normal, fuel consumption as expected. Reach 30,000 feet, leveling off, beginning cruise power assessment. 1 hour at cruise power, fuel consumption showing approximately 12% below standard rate, engine running notably smoother. At that last transmission, Malone exchanged a glance with Major Thompson. 12% was better than they'd dared hope for. After 2 hours and 45 minutes, nearly 30 minutes longer than a standard test flight, Whitaker's voice came over the radio again. Beginning descent. Total fuel remaining significantly above expected levels. Request permission for extended flight to test maximum range improvement. Thompson hesitated, then keyed the microphone. Permission granted. Maintain radio contact at 15-minute intervals. The minutes stretched into hours as Lady Liberty continued to fly. 3 hours, 4 hours, 5. Each radio check confirmed the same. The modified fuel system was performing beyond expectations. Finally, after an unprecedented 7 hours and 20 minutes aloft, Whitaker's Mustang appeared on the horizon, descending toward Leiston. The P-51 touched down smoothly, taxied to the dispersal area, and cut its engine. As Whitaker climbed down from the cockpit, a small crowd of mechanics and pilots had gathered. His face split into a wide grin as he approached Malone. "Sergeant, I don't know what kind of magic you worked on this bird, but she flew like a dream. Fuel consumption at cruise was down nearly 15%. That translates to almost 300 additional miles of range." Malone's professional demeanor cracked, a smile breaking through. "The fuel flow was smooth, sir. Smoother than I've ever felt it. The engine maintained optimal temperature throughout, even during combat maneuvers." Whitaker turned to Major Thompson. "Sir, with this modification, we could escort the bombers all the way to Berlin and back with fuel to spare. We could even loiter over the target area if needed." Thompson's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed his excitement. "How quickly can you modify the rest of the squadron's aircraft, Sergeant?" 3 days for all operational aircraft, sir. We've refined the process, and I can train additional mechanics." "Make it 2 days," Thompson replied. "I'll speak with Colonel Spicer about putting this into the regular maintenance schedule. If he agrees, I'll cable Wright Field with our results." As the crowd dispersed, Whitaker pulled Malone aside. "You know what this means, don't you? We've just changed the air war over Europe." Malone glanced at the Mustang, its sleek form silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. "It's just a more efficient fuel system, sir." "No, Sergeant," Whitaker said, his voice dropping. "It's the difference between our boys making it home or ditching in the Channel. It's the difference between the bombers having escort all the way to target and back, or flying unprotected through German fighter territory." He clasped Malone's shoulder. "Sometimes the biggest victories don't come from the guns." May 12, 1944, 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. Colonel James Spicer of the 357th Fighter Group stood before the assembled engineering officers of the 8th Air Force, his presentation board showing the dramatic improvement in mission effectiveness over the past month. Behind him, Technical Sergeant Frank Malone stood at parade rest, still uncomfortable in his freshly pressed uniform. "Gentlemen, The fuel line modification developed by Sergeant Malone has been implemented across our entire group with remarkable results, Spicer announced. In the past 3 weeks, we have not lost a single aircraft to fuel starvation. Our effective combat radius has increased by approximately 300 miles. Most significantly, our pilots now have the confidence to engage enemy aircraft aggressively, knowing they have sufficient fuel reserves for the return journey.